So I want to talk about something that has been a hot button topic for about a week or so now in the gaming industry. On December 7th, a new game came out that has completely shaken gamers to their absolute core. I am, yes, of course, talking about The Day Before, and it has been met with extremely angry responses. While I don't usually cover stuff like this, I feel like it's important that I give my opinion about this kind of stuff because I was actually really looking forward to this game when I saw it a while back. Once I saw that it had come out, I did my usual practice of waiting a little bit for the dust to settle, the servers to stabilize, and to see how it was doing, and well... no. Now, before I go any further into talking about this, first I need to say that no, I have not personally played the game myself, which is normally a factor that I would recommend considering when giving your opinion on things, since different things appeal to different people. However, in this particular case, from not only what I have seen gameplay-wise to reaction-wise, unfortunately, this does seem like it has been a case of too good to be true. First, if you're unfamiliar with the situation regarding this game, essentially The Day Before has been a game that has been in development for about 5 years now, according to the developers, although based on what I've seen, it's kind of hard to believe that. And it has been met with a lot of scrutiny over the past couple days because it is being claimed as the probably biggest scam in gaming history to date. Essentially, when this game was announced and the trailers that came out supporting it, it painted it to be this big sort of MMO zombie survival type game and had similar aspects to things like The Division, World War Z, DayZ, and simply put, it became one of the most anticipated and wishlisted games on Steam by a lot of people, and I'd be lying if I said I was not one of them. However, as the development process continued on and the marketing for this game kept getting more and more, a lot of sketchy tactics started to be seen. The trailers for the game all seemed to show a whole lot of pre-rendered scenes without really showing any actual gameplay, which is usually a big red flag for a lot of people right off the bat. And ultimately, every single time some sort of new footage or gameplay was supposed to be released, the game got delayed or pushed back, or something happened that basically said that this game needs to take more and more time. Naturally, skepticism started to rise from players and people started to get more and more worried, and that all came to a head on the 7th when the game officially went into early access, in which we got the game that they had released, which was not the game that they had advertised. The game that was supposed to be this big, massive multiplayer online zombie survival game ended up being more like an extraction shooter similar to things like Tarkov or The Cycle, and on top of that being a very, very bad one. It was janky, it was hard to play, and even if you were able to get in, you found yourself in just this very blah, lackluster world that just felt like a very generic third-person shooter set in the city. And understandably, a lot of people were very upset, and very quickly, many people wanted to get refunds. In almost an instant, the game had an overwhelmingly negative review on Steam. Now, this is not an incredibly uncommon thing to happen in games these days. We've all had those experiences where a game goes live and it's not exactly what we thought it was very janky, and most of the time it's something that you could live with because the devs are typically going to fix it relatively quickly, or they will at least say that they are aware about it and try to fix it as the time progresses. A very good example of this was Lords of the Fallen. When that game first came out, it was relatively unplayable for some people as it was just very taxing on the system, but very, very quickly they started releasing update after update after update that optimized the game and made it better for people to play. However, in this case, the developers, Fantastic Games, decided to actually announce that they are shutting down the entire studio only a few days after the game's early access launch.
What did you say?
This angered so many people because essentially this company had scammed a lot of people out of their money, and now we're just doing a rug pull and trying to get out of there with what they could. This led a lot of people to believe that there never really was a game to begin with, and they were just kind of banking on the fact that people were going to be pre-ordering like it's nothing, and when it finally became time for them to release it, they just had to throw something together with a bunch of very easily to obtain assets, and then just take the money and run when it doesn't go very well. Now, whether or not it was an actual scam to begin with, I'm personally not sure. Now, the good person in me wants to give these people the benefit of a doubt and say, well, maybe they were just a genuine game development studio that bit off a little bit more than they can chew, and they don't really know how to respond to it, so they're just kind of hiding in a corner. However, the realist in me, unfortunately, is thinking a little bit different, and things are kind of lining up too conveniently for it not to be the case. It is extremely convenient after all that as soon as the refund requests started to come in, all of a sudden the development company shuts down and completely deletes their whole online presence. And when I say entire online presence, I mean everything. Even their LinkedIn page is gone, which is something I've never even heard of happening. Essentially, this leads everybody to believing that this was just another asset flip game. Now, what exactly is an asset flip game? Well, it's essentially a game that has absolutely no effort put into it whatsoever, as they just buy a bunch of assets from the Unreal Engine store or whatever engine process that they're using and throw together a game that looks really good in visuals, but not in practice. To make it look just appealing enough to get people to buy, they try to make the game look like other more successful games. Like in the case of The Day Before, it looks like The Division, like DayZ, like Tarkov, and that in turn gets people to want to buy it before they eventually double back. Now this raises an interesting conundrum because the process of this kind of easy development game system is both good and bad. It's good in the sense that it's never been easier for people to develop games, and this is talking as somebody who wanted to make games for a long time but just never really got into it. However, it makes it harder to know what's legit and what's not, and especially a lot easier for people to make games like this and just do a cash grab. Ultimately, the game looks like a bad mixture of The Division and Rust and 7 Days to Die and just a whole lot of generic zombie survival third-person shooter games. And it just makes it look incredibly generic with no style of its own and rather boring looking. The game looks just good enough to get people hyped and interested in it and keep them playing long enough that way they can go past the Steam refund window, which is about 2 hours. I think the saddest part about this entire thing is that this game looks like it had a lot of potential. It looks like it could have been something really, really good. I mean, 7 Days to Die for me personally is my favorite zombie survival game, and if you took that and added aspects of The Division into it, that would have been awesome, and I would have absolutely eaten it up. And a lot of people would have as well, and that's why they made this game the way that they did, because they know that this style, this genre, is something that people really want to play. Ultimately, I personally think that there was never really a game here to begin with, and they were planning on doing this from the get-go. Everything lines up too much for it to just be some major coincidence. And personally, I think that they should refund everyone who has bought it and should honestly probably be sued by either the publishers for misconduct or even just Steam itself for putting such a controversial title on their market. In fact, at the time of doing this voiceover, a lot of people have been refunded, which is a step in the right direction. It's sad that something like this was able to happen and on this big of a scale, and unfortunately it's probably going to happen again, but hopefully now people will be a little bit more aware of what they're getting into. This will definitely go down as one of the worst gaming scams in all of history. I think something else that's causing a lot of talk because of this game is the idea of early access in general and people's thoughts about it. Early access in its entirety, I think, is something that people are very split between. People either really love the idea of early access or do not like it for multiple different reasons. The fact that there are so many early access titles out there at almost any given point in time can make it seem very difficult to determine what is good and what is bad. I don't personally think early access is entirely bad so long as there is a good amount of transparency between both the consumers and the creators between what is happening. As a consumer, you are agreeing to buy a product in early access that is, for all intents and purposes, not created, in the hopes that the developer will continue to improve and eventually fix it. If the devs do not get enough support, then it may fall through, and that is a risk that you need to know that you are taking. A couple of examples of early access games that I personally was into for a little while but didn't really fall through, one of them being The Cycle. Now The Cycle is in an interesting position because it started off as this crazy team-based shooter with powers and all that kind of stuff, and then turned into a Tarkov-esque extraction shooter. And unfortunately, because of the massive shift in genre, people did not really like what was happening to it, so the game eventually fell through and failed because of financial reasons. Another unfortunate case in this is Gundam Evolution, a fun arena-based team shooter that you could play as all kinds of different Gundams. Unfortunately, the game was basically just an Overwatch clone and did not sit well with a lot of people, and again, did not really financially take off. Again, these games were all early access games that people needed to realize what they were investing into. There is a chance that these things can fall through, and you need to be aware of that. I think early access can be a fantastic tool for both developers and consumers if it's done properly. And that's one of the biggest problems, is that there isn't a whole lot of transparency between developer and consumer in a lot of cases, and unfortunately that causes a lot of games to fall through. I think what's also very important is the strength for players in waiting for post-release to form an opinion. The situation with The Day Before is going to, and should, make players more aware of the kinds of games that they are investing in. It's very important to do your research on who is making what and what exactly it is supposed to be. That way you understand what it is that you're putting time and money into. That's not to say that early access games can't work very well. I mean, look at Deep Rock Galactic. The game was in a very different place in its early access stage, and honestly, if it stayed there, it probably wouldn't be nearly as successful as it was now, and nobody would probably be playing it. But the fact that the players and the developers were transparent and consistent with each other allowed the game to grow into what it is now as one of the best co-op games that's out there. It just goes to show that there is a very big difference between titles that are out there that genuinely put care and love into the projects that they make, and ones that just take from preset stuff just to try to make money. My heart and soul go out to everybody who is affected by this scam, and hopefully you get your money back, and hopefully also this development company gets what's coming to them. Well, I just wanted to get my thoughts out about that particular topic. Thank you guys for listening to me ramble for a little while. The whole situation just really got to me, and this is by far, as I've said, one of the worst scamming situations I've ever seen happen in gaming history. And hopefully we never see anything like this again. But chances are we will, but hopefully it never gets this far. If you were affected by this scam, let me know down in the comments, and let me know also if you were refunded and if anybody was able to get back to you. It's important for us gamers to unite on this kinds of stuff because these kinds of developers just cannot get away with these practices. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video informative. If you did, please be sure to give it a like because it tells me what types of videos you guys like to see. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.